Tonight, we return to Wonderland, to a table set beneath a crooked tree where time has stopped and tea is never finished, where riddles have no answers and logic quietly slips away. We wander through painted roses under the watchful eyes of a queen who rules with sudden fury, and into a garden where the rules of the game change with every breath. And then we walk toward the sea, where a sorrowful creature waits with memories of lessons that lessen and dances that drift like waves beneath the moon. Tonight, we gather 3 curious chapters into one continuous dream. Let the world grow quieter now, and allow Wonderland to unfold beneath the soft glow of the northern lights. Chapter 7. A Mad Tea Party. There was a table set out under a tree in front of the house, and the March Hare and the Hatter were having tea at it. A dormouse was sitting between them, fast asleep, and the other 2 were using it as a cushion, resting their elbows on it, and talking over its head. Very uncomfortable for the dormouse, thought Alice. Only, as it's asleep, I suppose it doesn't mind. The table was a large one, but the 3 were all crowded together at one corner of it. "No room! No room!" they cried out when they saw Alice coming. "There's plenty of room," said Alice indignantly, and she sat down in a large armchair at one end of the table. "Have some wine," the March Hare said in an encouraging tone. Alice looked all round the table, but there was nothing on it but tea. "I don't see any wine," she remarked. "There isn't any," said the March Hare. "Then it wasn't very civil of you to offer it," said Alice angrily. "It wasn't very civil of you to sit down without being invited," said the March Hare. "I didn't know it was your table," said Alice. "It's laid for a great many more than 3. "Your hair wants cutting," said the Hatter. "You should learn not to make personal remarks," Alice said with some severity. "It's very rude." "Why is a raven like a writing desk?" "Come, we shall have some fun now," thought Alice. "Do you mean that you think you can find out the answer to it?" said the March Hare. "Exactly so," said Alice. "Then you should say what you mean," the March Hare went on. "I do," Alice hastily replied. At least I mean what I say." "That's the same thing, you know." "Not the same thing a bit," said the Hatter. "You might just as well say that I see what I eat is the same thing as I eat what I see." "You might just as well say," added the March Hare, "that I like what I get is the same thing as I get what I like." "You might just as well say," added the Dormouse sleepily, "that I breathe when I sleep is the same thing as I sleep when I breathe." "It is the same thing with you," said the Hatter, and here the conversation dropped. "Have you guessed the riddle yet?" the Hatter said. "No, I give it up," Alice replied. "What's the answer?" "I haven't the slightest idea," said the Hatter. "Nor I," said the March Hare. Alice sighed wearily. "I think you might do something better with the time," she said, "than waste it in asking riddles that have no answers." "If you knew time as well as I do," said the Hatter, "you wouldn't talk about wasting it. It's him. Now, if you only kept on good terms with him, he'd do almost anything you liked with the clock." "It's always tea time," said the Hatter with a sigh, "and we've no time to wash the things between whiles." "Then you keep moving round, I suppose," said Alice. "Exactly so," said the Hatter, "as the things get used up." "But what happens when you come to the beginning again?" asked Alice. "Suppose we change the subject," the March Hare interrupted, yawning. "Once upon a time there were 3 little sisters," the Dormouse began in a great hurry, "and their names were Elsie, Lacey, and Tilly, and they lived at the bottom of a well." "What did they live on?" said Alice. "They lived on treacle," said the Dormouse. "A treacle well." "There's no such thing," said Alice. "Shh, shh," said the Hatter and the March Hare. "If you can't be civil," said the Dormouse, "you'd better finish the story for yourself." They were learning to draw, everything that begins with an M. "Why with an M?" said Alice. "Why not?" said the March Hare. "Twinkle, twinkle, little bat, how I wonder what you're at. Up above the world you fly, like a tea tray in the sky." Twinkle, twinkle. This piece of rudeness was more than Alice could bear. She got up in great disgust and walked off. The Dormouse fell asleep instantly, and neither of the others took the least notice of her going. "At any rate, I'll never go there again," said Alice. Just as she said this, she noticed that one of the trees had a door leading right into it. "That's very curious." And in she went. Once more, she found herself in the long hall, close to the little glass table. Then she went to work, nibbling at the mushroom till she was about a foot high, and then she found herself at last in the beautiful garden, among the bright flower beds and the cool fountains. The Hatter was the first to break the silence. "What day of the month is it?" he said, turning to Alice. He had taken his watch out of his pocket and was looking at it uneasily, shaking it every now and then and holding it to his ear. Alice considered a little. "The 4th," she said quietly. "2 days wrong," sighed the Hatter. "I told you butter wouldn't suit the works." He looked angrily at the March Hare. "It was the best butter," the March Hare replied meekly. "Yes, but some crumbs must have got in as well," the Hatter grumbled. "You shouldn't have put it in with the bread knife." The March Hare took the watch and looked at it gloomily. Then he dipped it into his cup of tea and looked at it again. But he could think of nothing better to say than his first remark. "It was the best butter, you know." Alice had been looking over his shoulder with some curiosity. "What a funny watch," she remarked. "It tells the day of the month and doesn't tell what o'clock it is." "Why should it?" muttered the Hatter. "Does your watch tell you what year it is?" "Of course not," Alice replied very readily. "But that's because it stays the same year for such a long time together." "Which is just the case with mine," said the Hatter. Alice felt dreadfully puzzled. "I don't quite understand you," she said, as politely as she could. "I want a clean cup," interrupted the Hatter. "Let's all move one place on." He moved on as he spoke, and the Dormouse followed him. The March Hare moved into the Dormouse's place, and Alice, rather unwillingly, took the place of the March Hare. The Hatter was the only one who got any advantage from the change, and Alice was a good deal worse off than before, as the March Hare had just upset the milk jug into his plate. "They were learning to draw," the Dormouse went on, yawning and rubbing its eyes, "for it was getting very sleepy. And they drew all manner of things, everything that begins with an M." "Why with an M?" said Alice. "Why not?" said the March Hare. Alice was silent. This piece of rudeness was more than Alice could bear. She got up in great disgust and walked off. The Dormouse fell asleep instantly, and neither of the others took the least notice of her going, though she looked back once or twice, half hoping that they would call after her. The last time she saw them, they were trying to put the Dormouse into the teapot. "At any rate, I'll never go there again," said Alice. "It's the stupidest tea party I ever was at in all my life." Just as she said this, she noticed that one of the trees had a door leading right into it. "That's very curious. But everything's curious today. I think I may as well go in at once." And in she went. Once more, she found herself in the long hall, close to the little glass table. "Now, I'll manage better this time," she said to herself. She took the little golden key and unlocked the door that led into the garden. Then she went to work, nibbling at the mushroom till she was about a foot high. Then she walked down the little passage, and then she found herself at last in the beautiful garden, among the bright flower beds and the cool fountains. Chapter 8. The Queen's Croquet Ground. A large rose tree stood near the entrance of the garden. The roses growing on it were white, but there were 3 gardeners at it, busily painting them red. Alice thought this a very curious thing, and she went nearer to watch them. And just as she came up to them, she heard one of them say, "Look out now, 5. Don't go splashing paint over me like that." "I couldn't help it," said 5 in a sulky tone. "7 jogged my elbow." On which 7 looked up and said, "That's right, 5. Always lay the blame on others." "The Queen! The Queen!" cried the gardeners suddenly, and they threw themselves flat upon their faces. There was a sound of many footsteps, and Alice looked round, eager to see the Queen. First came 10 soldiers carrying clubs. These were all shaped like the 3 gardeners. Next, the 10 courtiers. These were ornamented all over with diamonds, and walked 2 and 2 as the soldiers did. After these came the royal children. There were 10 of them, and the little dears came jumping merrily along hand in hand. Then followed the guests, mostly kings and queens, and among them Alice recognized the white rabbit. At last came the King and Queen of Hearts. The Queen turned crimson with fury, and, after glaring at her for a moment like a wild beast, began screaming, "Off with her head! Off!" "Nonsense," said Alice, very loudly and decidedly, and the Queen was silent. "Can you play croquet?" shouted the Queen. "Yes," shouted Alice, and the game began. Alice thought she had never seen such a curious croquet ground in her life. It was all ridges and furrows. The balls were live hedgehogs, the mallets live flamingos, and the soldiers had to double themselves up and stand on their hands and feet to make the arches. The chief difficulty Alice found at first was in managing her flamingo. She succeeded in getting its body tucked away comfortably enough under her arm, with its legs hanging down, but generally, just as she had got its neck nicely straightened out and was going to give the hedgehog a blow with its head, it would twist itself round and look up in her face with such a puzzled expression that she could not help bursting out laughing. The players all played at once without waiting for turns, quarreling all the while and fighting for the hedgehogs, and in a very short time the Queen was in a furious passion and went stamping about and shouting, "Off with his head!" or "Off with her head!" about once in a minute. Alice began to feel very uneasy. To be sure, she had not as yet had any dispute with the Queen, but she knew that it might happen any minute. And then, thought she, what would become of me? They're dreadfully fond of beheading people here. The great wonder is that there's anyone left alive. She was looking about for some way of escape and wondering whether she could get away without being seen, when she noticed a curious appearance in the air. It puzzled her very much at first, but after watching it a minute or two, she made it out to be a grin, and she said to herself, "It's the Cheshire Cat. Now I shall have somebody to talk to." "How are you getting on?" said the cat, as soon as there was mouth enough for it to speak with. "I don't think they play at all fairly," Alice began, in rather a complaining tone. "And they all quarrel so dreadfully one can't hear oneself speak. And they don't seem to have any rules in particular. At least, if there are, nobody attends to them. And you've no idea how confusing it is, all the things being alive. For instance, there's the arch I've got to go through next, walking about at the other end of the ground. And I should have croqueted the Queen's hedgehog just now, only it ran away when it saw mine coming." Soon there was a dispute between the executioner, the king, and the Queen, who were all talking at once, while all the rest were quite silent and looked very uncomfortable. The executioner's argument was that you couldn't cut off a head unless there was a body to cut it off from, that he had never had to do such a thing before, and he wasn't going to begin at his time of life. The king's argument was that anything that had a head could be beheaded, and that you weren't to talk nonsense. The Queen's argument was that if something wasn't done about it in less than no time, she'd have everybody executed all round. It was this last remark that had made the whole party look so grave and anxious. Alice thought she might as well go back and see how the game was going on, as she heard the Queen's voice in the distance, screaming with passion. She had already heard her sentence 3 of the players to be executed for having missed their turns, and she did not like the look of things at all, as the game was in such confusion that she never knew whether it was her turn or not. So she went in search of her hedgehog. The hedgehog was engaged in a fight with another hedgehog, which seemed to Alice an excellent opportunity for croqueting one of them with the other. The only difficulty was that her flamingo was gone across to the other side of the garden, where Alice could see it trying in a helpless sort of way to fly up into a tree. The moment the Duchess was gone, the Queen ordered the executioner to fetch the cat's head. The executioner went off like an arrow. The cat's head began fading away the moment he was gone, and by the time he had come back with the Duchess, it had entirely disappeared. So the king and the executioner ran wildly up and down looking for it, while the rest of the party went back to the game. Chapter 9. The Mock Turtle's Story. "You can't think how glad I am to see you again, you dear old thing," said the Duchess as she tucked her arm affectionately into Alice's, and they walked off together. Alice was very glad to find her in such a pleasant temper, and thought to herself that perhaps it was only the pepper that had made her so savage when they met in the kitchen. "When I'm a duchess," she said to herself, not in a very hopeful tone though, "I won't have any pepper in my kitchen at all. Soup does very well without. Maybe it's always pepper that makes people hot-tempered," she went on, very much pleased at having found out a new kind of rule. "And vinegar that makes them sour, and chamomile that makes them bitter, and barley sugar and such things that make children sweet-tempered. I only wish people knew that. Then they wouldn't be so stingy about it, you know." She had quite forgotten the Duchess by this time, and was a little startled when she heard her voice close to her ear. "You're thinking about something, my dear, and that makes you forget to talk. I can't tell you just now what the moral of that is, but I shall remember it in a bit." "Perhaps it hasn't one," Alice ventured to remark. But here, to Alice's great surprise, the Duchess's voice died away, even in the middle of her favorite word, moral, and the arm that was linked into hers began to tremble. Alice looked up, and there stood the Queen in front of them, with her arms folded, frowning like a thunderstorm. "A fine day, Your Majesty," the Duchess began in a low, weak voice. "Now I give you fair warning," shouted the Queen, stamping on the ground as she spoke. "Either you or your head must be off, and that in about half no time. Take your choice." The Duchess took her choice and was gone in a moment. "Let's go on with the game," the Queen said to Alice, and Alice was too much frightened to say a word, but slowly followed her back to the croquet ground. The other guests had taken advantage of the Queen's absence and were resting in the shade. However, the moment they saw her, they hurried back to the game, the Queen merely remarking that a moment's delay would cost them their lives. All the time they were playing, the Queen never left off quarreling with the other players and shouting, "Off with his head!" or "Off with her head!" Those whom she sentenced were taken into custody by the soldiers, who of course had to leave off being arches to do this, so that by the end of half an hour or so there were no arches left, and all the players, except the King, the Queen, and Alice, were in custody and under sentence of execution. Then the Queen left off, quite out of breath, and said to Alice, "Have you seen the mock turtle yet?" "No," said Alice. "I don't even know what a mock turtle is." "It's the thing mock turtle soup is made from," said the Queen. "I never saw one, or heard of one," said Alice. "Come on then," said the Queen, "and he shall tell you his history." As they walked off together, Alice heard the King say in a low voice to the company generally, "You are all pardoned." "Come, that's a good thing," she said to herself, for she had felt quite unhappy at the number of executions the Queen had ordered. They very soon came upon a griffin lying fast asleep in the sun. If you don't know what a griffin is, look at the picture. "Up, lazy thing," said the Queen, "and take this young lady to see the mock turtle and to hear his history. I must go back and see after some executions I have ordered." And she walked off, leaving Alice alone with the griffin. Alice did not quite like the look of the creature, but on the whole she thought it would be quite as safe to stay with it as to go after that savage Queen. So she waited. The griffin sat up and rubbed its eyes. Then it watched the Queen till she was out of sight. Then it chuckled. "What fun," said the griffin, half to itself, half to Alice. "What is the fun?" said Alice. "Why, she," said the griffin. "It's all her fancy that. They never executes nobody, you know. Come on." "Everybody says come on here," thought Alice as she went slowly after it. "I never was so ordered about in all my life. Never." They had not gone far before they saw the mock turtle in the distance, sitting sad and lonely on a little ledge of rock, and, as they came nearer, Alice could hear him sighing as if his heart would break. She pitied him deeply. "What is his sorrow?" she asked the Griffin, and the Griffin answered, very nearly in the same words as before, "It's all his fancy, that. He hasn't got no sorrow, you know. Come on." So they went up to the Mock Turtle, who looked at them with large eyes full of tears, but said nothing. "This here young lady," said the Griffin, "she wants for to know your history, she do." "I'll tell it her," said the Mock Turtle in a deep, hollow tone. "Sit down, both of you, and don't speak a word till I've finished." So they sat down, and nobody spoke for some minutes. Alice thought to herself, "I don't see how he can ever finish if he doesn't begin." But she waited patiently. "Once," said the Mock Turtle at last, with a deep sigh, "I was a real turtle." These words were followed by a very long silence, broken only by an occasional exclamation of "Hyar!" from the Griffin, and the constant heavy sobbing of the Mock Turtle. Alice was very nearly getting up and saying, "Thank you, sir, for your interesting story," but she could not help thinking there must be more to come, so she sat still and said nothing. "When we were little," the Mock Turtle went on at last, more calmly, though still sobbing a little now and then, "we went to school in the sea. The master was an old turtle. We used to call him Tortoise." "Why did you call him Tortoise, if he wasn't one?" Alice asked. "We called him Tortoise because he taught us," said the Mock Turtle angrily. "Really, you are very dull." "You ought to be ashamed of yourself for asking such a simple question," added the Griffin, and then they both sat silent and looked at poor Alice, who felt ready to sink into the earth. At last the Griffin said to the Mock Turtle, "Drive on, old fellow, don't be all day about it," and he went on in these words. "Yes, we went to school in the sea, though you mayn't believe it." "I never said I didn't," interrupted Alice. "You did," said the Mock Turtle. "Hold your tongue," added the Griffin, before Alice could speak again. The Mock Turtle went on. "We had the best of educations. In fact, we went to school every day." "I've been to a day school too," said Alice. "You needn't be so proud as all that." "With extras?" asked the Mock Turtle a little anxiously. "Yes," said Alice. "We learned French and music." "And washing?" said the Mock Turtle. "Certainly not," said Alice indignantly. "Ah, then yours wasn't a really good school," said the Mock Turtle in a tone of great relief. "Now at ours, they had at the end of the bill, French, music, and washing, extra." "You couldn't have wanted it much," said Alice, living at the bottom of the sea. "I couldn't afford to learn it," said the Mock Turtle with a sigh. "I only took the regular course." "What was that?" inquired Alice. "Reeling and writhing, of course, to begin with," the Mock Turtle replied, "and then the different branches of arithmetic: ambition, distraction, uglification, and derision." "I never heard of uglification," Alice ventured to say. "What is it?" The Griffin lifted up both its paws in surprise. "What? Never heard of uglifying?" it exclaimed. "You know what to beautify is, I suppose." "Yes," said Alice doubtfully. "It means to make anything prettier." "Well then," the Griffin went on, "if you don't know what to uglify is, you are a simpleton." Alice did not feel encouraged to ask any more questions about it, so she turned to the Mock Turtle and said, "What else had you to learn?" "Well, there was mystery," the Mock Turtle replied, counting off the subjects on his flappers. "Mystery, ancient and modern, with seaography. Then drawling. The drawling master was an old conger eel that used to come once a week. He taught us drawling, stretching, and fainting in coils." "What was that like?" said Alice. "Well, I can't show it you myself," the Mock Turtle said. "I'm too stiff. And the Griffin never learnt it." "Hadn't time," said the Griffin. "I went to the classics master, though. He was an old crab, he was." "I never went to him," the Mock Turtle said with a sigh. "He taught laughing and grief, they used to say." So he did, said the Griffin, sighing in his turn, and both creatures hid their faces in their paws. "And how many hours a day did you do lessons?" said Alice, in a hurry to change the subject. 10 hours the first day, said the Mock Turtle, 9 the next, and so on. "What a curious plan!" exclaimed Alice. "That's the reason they're called lessons," the Gryphon remarked, "because they lessen from day to day." This was quite a new idea to Alice, and she thought it over a little before she made her next remark. "Then the 11th day must have been a holiday." "Of course it was," said the Mock Turtle. "And how did you manage on the 12th?" Alice went on eagerly. But the Gryphon interrupted in a very decided tone. "That's enough about lessons," he said. "Tell her something about the games now." And so, the tea grows cold beneath the crooked tree. The painted roses stand quietly in the garden, and the sound of the waves drifts softly along the shore. Riddles were asked, heads were nearly lost, lessons were learned and unlearned. In Wonderland, nothing stays sensible for long. And yet, within the nonsense, there is something tender, a quiet courage, a patient curiosity, a heart that keeps listening. Tonight, we leave Alice beneath the stars, with the echo of the lobster quadrille still floating in the air. Let the garden grow still now. Let the sea settle into silence. Let the strange become soft. Rest. And when you are ready, we will wander deeper into Wonderland.